Good morning. We are live on the Falcons podcast. Apologies for being a little late. I am going to crank up the Facebook groups, Atlanta Falcons fans on all Falcons and Scott Kennedy Sports. Nick should be joining us any moment, and we'll get ready to go. And good morning, everybody. This is the Falcons podcast. We are live as we do so every Monday morning at 9 a.m.-ish. A couple minutes late today. Lots of stuff going on with the NFL playoffs, coaching searches, etc. And then when I log in, my says, we can't find your camera or microphone. Okay, quick restart. And then let's get started. You don't really care how all of that works. You just want to talk some Falcons football. And frankly, I'm actually a little surprised. I guess I shouldn't be, but it feels like the Falcons had zeroed in on their target and had gotten their 2 interviews in. And this situation may have already resolved itself if they were going to make a quick hire. That said, for whatever you can believe, owners and general managers, when they speak in front of the public, Arthur Blank and Rich McKay said that this would not necessarily be a quick process. They wanted to take their time, and frankly, they have. They've interviewed 13 candidates already. They've interviewed 2 of them. One of them won twice. Bill Belichick is the only one that has gotten 2 interviews. Jim Harbaugh is scheduled for a second interview, and they have put in a request for Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero for a second interview. So right now, if we're counting interviews, the guys who have talked about having second interviews are Bill Belichick, who has gotten a second interview, Jim Harbaugh, who is scheduled for a second interview, and Ejiro Evero, who has been requested for the Carolina Panthers to have a second interview. So we just got started. We're going to bring in Nick Kendall here, who is just getting done with an early morning baby feed. Nick, it looks like you're relatively clean. Either that or did a quick wardrobe change, so I think everything went well for you. How you doing this morning?
Tired. Pretty good, though. He's developed a pattern of – he's pretty sleepy. Came a little early, so a little bit sleepy throughout most of the day. But 11 p.m. to 3 a.m., man, party's on. Awake, crying, cooing, doing all this stuff. So we'd like to break that pattern. But here, I think it's Monday. God bless. And excited to talk a little ball.
Yeah, I think for the first couple of weeks, it was every 2 hours for us.
Yeah.
So I'd do like a 10 and go to bed. She would get the midnight. I'd get the 2 a.m. and go back to bed. And then I'd get up at 2, 4, 8. It wasn't so bad. It wasn't so bad to be able to do it that way. But yeah, it can be tough. So want to say hello to everybody. We come in and do these live because we like having y'all here. And we've gotten a lot of new faces in here. The channel's grown almost 10% this month alone. Not just all Falcons fans, but a lot. And I want to say thank you to those of you that come in. Just a reminder, we do all kinds of stuff. One of the reasons I was late is because I was posting, or at least scheduling, Sean McDermott's explanation for running a fake punt with Damar Hamlin and not, trying to go for it with Josh Allen, which, makes for some interesting listening. And then we've got the next week, Nick, next Monday, I'm leaving for Senior Bowl, leaving for driving down to Mobile. So it's going to, and I expect that to be our best year ever with the quarterbacks down there and everything, and the size of the channel growing because of people like you. So it should be a really good time. I want to say hello to some folks like John Harrell, who came in nice and early before we even got started. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick, and the boys from cold Wisconsin. Man, it's cold everywhere. And as I was down here yesterday morning, Nick, working, I'm like, it smells like heat. And it smells like my heat just kicked on. And it shouldn't have. No, that's the smell of my furnace dying. I've already replaced 3 air conditioners, and now it's the furnace. I've got more HVAC in my house than I do car to drive. It's, but you want to buy a house built in the 80s, get ready to replace a bunch of stuff.
Well, as long as you're staying warm, that's no good. I typically love to sleep pretty chilly in the house. Typically we'd have it like 68 during the day and then drop it down to 60 at night and bundle up. But now that the baby's here, nope, we're 68 to 72. God bless it. And anything else is concerning. So we're cooking now. And also the pets sleep in the king bed with us. So they're all like crammed on me, the big golden retriever. So it's hot. Talk about it. I'm not sleeping the most comfortably either, but that's okay. Baby's mostly sleeping, so that's great.
My 15-pound cat takes up more space and hogs the covers. I'm like, come on, man. How you doing? Michael Ronquillo, how are you doing? He says, good morning, Scott and Nick on the Falcons podcast. And I've got a shepherd mix that would just sheds way too much to ever I've never let them sleep in the bed, but the cats they get spoiled. Michael Renchio up nice and early with us. Good to see you. Henry Monsta. That feels like a newer name. If not, apologies, but I'll remember it next time. Henry, good to see you. Says, good morning, Scott. What do these second interviews mean aside from Bill? What's your interpretation of these with Jim Harbaugh? Because and Ejiro Evero, because I think there was another comment down here a little bit, and I'll end up finding it eventually. But it seems like, if Jim Harbaugh is taking a second interview with the Falcons, he at least needs to be interested, right? Or is this just more negotiation tactics? You never really know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a lot of due process stuff, figuring out what's going on. It's also some leveraging between each party as well, right? Like, you don't know if Bill Belichick will take your offer, so you don't want to be so far down the Belichick or bust pathway that if he goes somewhere else or decides to retire, that you're like, oh well, we have to start from square one now. So you're just going through the process makes a lot of sense. You're looking at a lot of the more experienced candidates as well outside of Ejiro Evero, and we'll see if more on the way. But right now, I'd still say Belichick is the favorite, but it does seem like the vibes would say that they're backing off there a bit. Maybe Harbaugh is a favorite, but Blank's going to make a splash. Blank doesn't have a lot of time left. He's going to be aggressive. We kind of saw it with the Deshaun Watson stuff. Just in general, they're looking to make a move and capitalize on the next 3 to 4 years, and that might be with a more experienced coach. So we'll see. Bobby Slowick's available now. There's some other guys as also. You know how much of a Mike McDonald fan I am, Scott. So I'd be interested in him. But seems like the experienced path of Harbaugh and Belichick is what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, and Slowick got his interview, so did Ben Johnson. One of the interesting things, like I said, I cut up a bunch of different and listened to the pressers from all across the NFL. And Dan Campbell was asked, how is Ben Johnson prioritizing these interviews? And he says, well, we'll find out, because the first time he's allowed to interview is on Saturday and Saturday night. And the Falcons got their interview with Ben Johnson last night via virtual interview after the Detroit Lions win that game. We know the Atlanta Falcons is a decent job. We know that. We've taught, it hasn't always been a decent job, but right now it's a good job. Arthur Blank is a good guy to work for. They've got plenty of money to pay top dollar. Ask Arthur Smith. He's getting a ton of it. The roster's in good shape. The facilities are great. It's good fan base down here. Atlanta's a great city. Ben Johnson getting that virtual interview after a big Detroit Lions win speaks a little bit of volumes too.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with who they could bring in. Ben Johnson was a big one as well that we talked about. But again, seems like it's going to be one of the big names out here taking advantage of it. And you have maybe a little bit less upside, as crazy as that sounds, with the second time guy, considering they were fired, but a lot more of a sure thing. So I guess third time around for Belichick, but will be really interesting, no doubt. I'm right now. I think I would probably lean towards Jim Harbaugh, is how the roster is set up with the offensive line, with how with Harbaugh, there's always going to be an expiration date because he just grinds people to a pulp. But I think that's okay with Arthur Smith here. If you're Arthur Blank, that you're looking at a 3 to 5 year window here. Well, that matches up with the expiration date of people getting real freaking tired of Harbaugh. So I don't know what that means for somebody like Fontenot. I know that I think the name is Dobbs. He's assistant general manager of the Colts. He's somebody that Harbaugh's been close with, that he would apparently like to work with. I don't know if that changes things a bit, or if it makes Fontenot on the hot seat if things go wrong this year, and we'll just bring in Harbaugh's guy a year later. But definitely, I think I am leaning towards Harbaugh right now, just with the infrastructure in place.
Really?
Yeah.
I know that the Chargers. Where would you put the Chargers in this race then? Because I know that's been an attractive job. You got your quarterback. I'm not 100% sure on their salary cap situation. I don't feel like it's in as good a shape as the Falcons, but I'll look that up while you're answering my question. What about the LA Chargers? Because I feel like they're one of the top rivals for who the top candidates, along with there's a lot of smoke around the Washington Commanders and Ben Johnson. For me, Ben Johnson is the top first-time head coaching candidate out there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of talk right now around him and the Commanders.
I would put McDonald with him as well. But I think that it comes down to, would you rather have the infrastructure in place around the quarterback, or would you rather have the quarterback already there? That really is the question. Let's say, Harbaugh absolutely loves JJ McCarthy. Well, you're not going to go get JJ McCarthy with the Chargers because you have Justin Herbert there, and he's one of the top. If there was a redraft of the entire league, Herbert's probably one of the first 5 picks, first 6 picks. But in the Falcons, you're right there in McCarthy land. If you want to go out there and get that quarterback, maybe that's really enticing to somebody like a Harbaugh. So would be definitely interesting. It just comes down to if he wants the quarterback or not. I'm also curious to say, I know we talked about a week ago, like, oh, maybe this position comes open with the Cowboys. It didn't. But I'm going to wait and see to make sure that McDermott still has the job in Buffalo before I'm secure that he's there, considering how often they've bumped their head up there and the whole jihad thing that they had this year. They're just bizarre out there with McDermott. I know they rallied and won a bunch of games after that, but I mean, that's a team that you probably need to reshuffle things because you kind of reached your ceiling with who they are there. So maybe that's a position that comes open, and then you have a totally different conversation with a Josh Allen led team to be coached. But I'm watching that one as well.
There was a funny Twix post. It's not funny, but it was making fun of that about Sean McDermott. The whole thing's not funny, but if you can't laugh at yourself a little bit, and sometimes laughing helps bad things feel better.
Called coping.
Yeah, it's called coping. Marley ATL says, good morning, Scott, Nick, and the Falcons Nation. I love this podcast. I tune in every day. Keep up the good work. It's very appreciated that you're here, Marley. Marley says, I really hope blank doesn't go through this whole process just to pick Bill Belichick. And that's what I said. Over the weekend, Michael Rothstein put out the report. He's the Falcons ESPN beat writer that the search is wide open. I'm like, I'm not going to believe that until it's someone other than Bill Belichick. Because right now I feel like you're already starting to get smoke around who would be Bill Belichick's offensive coordinator. He may bring Josh McDaniels with him. I'm starting to connect the dots a little bit on that. Is this thing already done? Are you really going to go through 13 interviews and this horse and pony show just to hire the guy? Belichick's not really getting a lot of interviews. That said, Rex Ryan threw his name out there today of going to the Bills, just going a little bit north and coaching Buffalo out there. So again, I don't particularly want Belichick. I'd probably put him 5th or 6th on the list of guys. I'd rather have Harbaugh than Belichick. My number 1 would still be Ben Johnson. I'd be really interested in Bobby Slowick, offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans, who did interview with the Falcons this weekend too, Nick.
Yeah, all good options. And I got to ask, what about Bill Belichick is not super interesting for you? Because I know that the offensive stuff really faded there in New England the last few years. But in Atlanta, you have a pretty good offensive infrastructure in place. And if you can bring in Josh McDaniels as well to...
That's what it comes down to for me, though, is you've got a 2-year window. Good morning, Roderick. He says, afternoon, Scott. Enjoyed the late 2 games. We learned something, didn't we? A quarterback draft needs at least 3 years before you can judge him. Red Swarm says, good morning, everyone. We're having a coffee. Yes, we are. For me, it's the quarterback situation with a guy that is on a 2 to 3 year project at most. You thought, year 3, you need to win in Arthur Smith, but it wasn't that he went 7. Yes, it was. It was that he went 7-10 again. It was that they actually regressed in their 3rd year. This is a 3-year project. That doesn't mean he had to go to the playoffs and win, but you can't regress. No. With Belichick, you're looking at most a 3-year project, and then he's done. I mean, he's going to be finished, and you still don't have your quarterback. So can you bring in Bill Belichick, and then what? That's still the big one to me. And then what are you doing at quarterback? You don't have time to take a bridge guy, a Marcus Mariota while you're doing this. You can't develop one. Can you get a quarterback that can come in and play right away? Kirk Cousins, who's also old and coming off a serious injury. That scares the hell out of me, Nick. So for me, it's the 2 pieces. It's the coach and the quarterback. And if you go Belichick, I don't know that you've got time to get the quarterback is the problem I have with Belichick.
It's tough, but that's, welcome to the NFL, right? If you don't have the quarterback, you're just circling the drain. So tough pathway there. I mean, would they just bring in a Jimmy Garoppolo? Would they bring in a Jacoby Brissett and pair that with a quarterback if it was, McDaniels and Belichick? There are options forward that would bring you more competency than you had this season. It definitely feels like it would be capped with those kind of options in there instead. But you never know with Belichick. I mean, he's still a legend. I don't understand fully the pushback from Atlanta fans. I mean, I get it. He's not number one, but like, it's not like this team is doomed if you bring in a Bill Belichick out here. Sometimes you need a little bit. Like, I know that a lot of people towards the end of the Brady Belichick era in New England were like, well, Brady's cooked. Look at his arm. He can't do it anymore. Shake it up there. He brings in a different intensity. The message is not dull anymore in the room when he goes out there to Tampa Bay, and boom, they become instant contenders.
But that's the problem. The part of the pushback is he's never been anything without Brady. It's all Brady. I disagree with that. And Rusty says that, the Bill Belichick situation is weird. If Bill tells Arthur Blank he wants a job, he's not going to say no. So this leads me to believe the holdup is on the Bills' end. I'm not quite sure on that one. I'm not positive right now that that's where they're going, or if there's, it takes time to work out contracts, or we want to finish the process. Again, I'd feel, and that is part of the process, going through when you're a Giro Evero. Last year you might have gotten a head coaching interview. This year you're getting to the second stage of interviews. In year 3, maybe you get the job. You get a head coaching job. And that's part of the process of paying your dues in this league. It just feels like a horse and pony show if you go up and finish this thing with Belichick. And the problem is with Belichick, and again, his defense was phenomenal for a team that had a historically bad offense. That's okay. But if you're even close to the opinion that he wasn't very good without Brady, where's Tom Brady in Atlanta, man? There's no one even close. There's not even an average level quarterback right now, and he's not going to have time to draft and develop. And we know how hard it is to get one, to acquire one. So what are you going to do on offense if it's Bill Belichick? You don't have time to say, okay, if one of these other guys comes in, we'll be a little more patient, because you're going to have to go after a rookie quarterback. You want Belichick to come in and draft a quarterback? He's 72 years old, man. That's the problem I have with it.
Yeah, it definitely does line up not very well. If you can pair him with a Kirk Cousins, I don't know if I believe the report about Cousins and Bill Belichick out there. Just believe it when I see it. But again, I see the comment here from Bryson. It's a good point. He says Belichick did nothing, but without Brady, and then you might have some issues there in the locker room. You might have issues with any of these guys coming in the locker room. You never know. I mean, the Broncos were, Nathaniel Hackett, they love him. He's a really good guy. And then in the locker room, it's total chaos. Everybody, the lack of authority and running in there. So there can be some issues either way. So I somewhat get the Belichick pushback with the quarterback window conversation, Scott, but he's Bill Belichick. Maybe it's just because he's been the boogeyman in my football fandom life for so long that I don't understand. Like, if he had a chance to go with him with where the roster is at right now, even though you don't have the quarterback, could be pretty darn good. Especially some of just how he could, I think, set up the infrastructure. But will be interesting for sure. John Brothers coming in, Raymond Collins. Good morning, everybody coming in here. Harry Marshall saying morning, y'all. Driving this morning, but I'm listening too. Well, good to see you, Harry. Be careful. Don't text and drive. Jose coming in saying they need Harbaugh. Yeah, I think thinking about the infrastructure in place of this team already, the window with Arthur Blank and the mountain that Harbaugh's climbed on and been everywhere he's gone. I mean, we talked about it last year with the Broncos, Scott. Harbaugh was my number one just because every single team that he goes on kind of becomes the same very aggressive team. He calls it, God, there's a word that he uses that I really love. It's intelligent brutality, I think is what he says, out there in Stanford and Michigan, these big academic schools, and he's not recruiting at the top, they're consistently in the 15s to 20s, but he's getting these big guys in there, and they're smart and they're physical and they lean on you, and everywhere he's gone, it's been that kind of team being built. And I think you could do a lot of that in Atlanta as well. The one negative is that I feel like his style of football probably lends itself better to some cold open air stadiums versus, Atlanta with all in the NFC South with all the good weather stadiums. But either way, could be a good fit there with what you have in place already.
Yeah, they can open up the roof, but again, great, spectacular facilities and everything. It's a very good job. That's not necessarily the problem anymore. There was a Make You Fumble, good to see you, says, I'm here. Well, I'm glad you are. Keith comes in and asks, what are your thoughts on Joe Brady and Raheem Morris? I was 100% against Joe Brady 3 years ago because he was coming off basically getting coffee for Sean Payton and then having a successful year at LSU with Joe Burrow. Who else was there with him? Jamar
Jamar
Chase,
Chase,
Justin
Justin
Jefferson.
Jefferson.
And it's like, oh wow, he had a successful offense there. Man, that's hard to believe. Congratulations, man. It was too soon for him. He went to Carolina and struggled, and I think it was a humbling experience for him. And he's went up to Buffalo, and despite one of our friends coming in, the Buffalo Bills continue their legacy of choking, and God bless do we relate to that. They just don't seem to have the low lows that the Atlanta teams have had throughout the years, as far as like going to the Super Bowl and then being 4-12 the next year. They're more like the Atlanta Braves. That was where I think there's a kindred spirit there. But now the Braves have 95 and what was it, 2020, 2021? So they've got 2 in their belt. That helps. But yeah, the Bills felt for them yesterday. They've got to hate the Kansas City Chiefs. They just have to. But thoughts on Raheem Morris?
I mean, he's going to have a pretty good chance to bring in a good staff, considering how many tentacles he's had in different staffs across the league. Still pretty young and seems like somebody who is got a good vision on his team. I mean, his ability to kind of match the 2 high safety stuff and the match quarters that Staley had there in the Rams, and going more to, the cover 3 centric stuff and marrying those concepts. That's hard to do. And he did it out there in the Rams. So he seems like somebody who can work with a multitude of ideologies and work it together. How many pieces on that Rams team are like, third day 3 picks as well, fitting these guys into good slots. I think he's got some good ideas in terms of how an infrastructure and how a team can be built. Not as flashy, maybe not the ceiling of, a big offensive guy or the number 1 defensive coordinator candidate in McDonald. But if he was your pick, I know it would feel probably a little underwhelming at first, but I would be excited because I think he's really competent. I think he could be pretty darn good.
I think one of the points I meant to make and I kind of forgot was the Falcoholic did a poll on who do you want who would you take? And they listed 4 guys, and it was almost tied at the top for Ben Johnson and Bill Belichick. I was like, okay, it's not quite as against. Now there's vocal people on there, and again, I've already gone through all the reasons why I wouldn't want Bill Belichick in my top 5. I just the window just doesn't seem to line up just because you don't have. Now, if this was the last 3 years of Matt Ryan's tenure, all right, I'm listening. But this is different. This is you need a quarterback guy. Well, he's going to bring Josh Daniels with him. All right, would you draft a quarterback? They did it with Mac Jones. Nick, there's your counter. If they did it with Mac Jones, and Mac Jones had a decent rookie season with Josh McDaniels as his offensive coordinator.
I think that's the one positive that you have here is that McDaniels is available again. And Bill Belichick's had his best teams with the McDaniels. And because McDaniels has the head coaching experience twice, you can kind of let him operate in his own bubble and on the offensive side of the ball. Now, is that going to lead to a highly explosive offense? It's not the Shanahan tree, although maybe we'll start to see Mike McDonald and his disciples and tenants maybe start to pass on and slow down the Shanahan tree some because he's dominated them this season. Yeah, I think that with Belichick bringing in McDaniels, I'm not as worried about the clown show that has been an issue in New England the last few years on the offensive side of the ball, because you'd probably bring in a known quantity in Josh McDaniels, and money wouldn't be an object there to skimp on that as well. So you could bring in who you wanted.
Anthony Evans says, rooting for Detroit. I think every neutral is really rooting for Detroit. And for some reason, as I'm watching these games, I kind of already flushed. I had to delete my post because I kind of already flushed Monday or Saturday's games down the drain. I'm like, Bills Lions would be pretty awesome. I don't want to see Chiefs and 49ers, blah, but Bills Lions would be fire. I'm like, oh yeah, the Ravens are out there, dumbass. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, the Ravens would be pretty good too. But still, Bills Lions would have been what I really wanted to see. I want to see two new teams in it. So I think we're all kind of for the Lions now.
I'd love to see Lamar get his ring. I'm I guess you can just call it as it is. Typically, I'm pretty objective, but call me a 49ers hater just because I don't want Brock Purdy to succeed because I don't like Iowa State that much. So anything that brings Iowa State fans joy, I'm tired of it. Even though he's throwing to George Kittle. And we have a pretty fun Iowa tight end versus Iowa tight end matchup there in the NFC Championship game with Laporta versus Kittle. But Can't do it. Too many Brock Purdy, Iowa State jerseys around in the Midwest. I can't. I need that out
There's
of my
going to be
vision.
too many people that are bad at math telling us that, see, you don't need to draft a quarterback in the first round. Look at Brock Purdy. Yes. Go and try and build your team around the Mr. Irrelevant. Please try and do that, and I'll keep taking my first rounders and beat your brains in.
Mm-hmm.
1 out of 100,000 aren't really good odds. Yes, it happens, and that's why we like having more picks, because you might get lucky.
There is something I wanted to talk about quick here, just to talk about the draft. This may be too far of a rabbit hole. Did you see Jim Nagy's tweet yesterday? Talking about it's as head of the Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy, talking about how teams are going to be probably fighting to get rid of their day 3 picks this year because it is the smallest underclassmen pool in NFL history, and it just keeps getting smaller and smaller by the year. And it's one part of it's the COVID year, a lot of it's NIL. But the draft landscape is changing. Talking about those day 3 picks, because there's so few underclassmen declaring, better product. Guys are coming in more prepared in the college side of things. But curious to see how teams utilize their day 3 picks going forward if the pool is not as good. He said essentially a lot of teams, especially rounds 5 through 7, are going to be taking guys off their undrafted free agent boards because they've just dried up completely. Going to be interesting.
It'd be worth trading back, like giving future picks, because this will end up balancing out eventually with the NIL. We talked about quarterbacks. If the average age of the quarterback might move up a year and a half moving forward, but that means while it goes from average age of 22 to 23, when it does that, there's going to be a 1-year gap. That gap will eventually balance out. This could be that gap here. Black Eisenberg coming in. I think we already made the decision the minute our defensive coordinator was granted permission to do interviews. That was a big signal to me too. Hey, you've already got your guy. If, maybe we're just trying to do right by Ryan Nielsen, but I'm also a little surprised Ryan Nielsen hasn't been allowed to interview for the head coaching job, even if it's just for practice. And would they announce that? I would think his agent would announce it, if nothing else. Floyd Donnelly has a good question. What is Ritter's future? Ritter has probably a 4-year deal as a 3rd-round pick, or is it should be a 4-year deal as a 3rd-round pick, I would think. He's dirt cheap and should be allowed to come in and compete, to stay and compete. So because he's cheap and experienced, he would be a good backup type and come in and compete. And if he wins the job, he wins the job. But the Atlanta Falcons have to go big after a quarterback in this offseason. If they fail, worst case is you've got Desmond Ridder. How worst case is that? It could be worse. But you're not going into the offseason thinking Desmond Ridder's our guy. You're not. That cost some guys their jobs this last offseason.
Yeah, Ritter's probably going to end up being a backup across the league and, a spot starter here or there. But, and I know we just had the comment in here about giving guys enough time, but, 2 years in, typically, 12 to 18 starts, you kind of know who guys are. I know there's the talk about, Josh Allen, look what he did early. But if you have a absolute height, weight, speed, arm talent unicorn, then maybe, give them a little bit longer leash, especially after you traded up for them. But typically, you know what a guy's going to be after 18 starts. Now those starts could come later on in their career, aka Jordan Love. Oh, look, they were patient with Jordan Love. Well, we just finally had 18 starts for him. We didn't know really who he was until we had him on the field for that year and a half. But I think with Ridder, you probably know who he is, and it's not good enough to take you where you want to go. But still, 2 years of control, rookie contract as a backup quarterback. There's value to that still, and he seems like a good locker room guy as well. So that's probably the future with Ridder. You'll keep him out here, and hopefully, if you get a dinged up quarterback, a starter too, he can navigate the offense well enough to squeak out a few wins and keep you relevant.
Jonathan Griffin says, I want Harbaugh. Please don't draft JJ. Red Swarm says, please, fellas, address the 2 in-person minority interviews that still hasn't been satisfied per reports, which is the Rooney Rule, and everyone's confused while no hire has been made. Yeah, because the only in-person interviews last week were the 2 guys that didn't have head coaching jobs, were Harbaugh and Belichick. So, but how were some of the other teams getting that done last week? Because frankly, it irritates me when Adam Schefter tweets, they've completed this interview, and that was happening last week, which has now satisfied the Rooney Rule. I'm like, just stop talking about it. it's demeaning.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like it. I don't like that you're bringing it into people's attention that, oh yeah, good, we've satisfied our quota, now we can go hire who we want to. It's demeaning to the candidates, and I don't like it. I wish that would stop.
Yeah, I think good intention, but bad as it in reality with the Rooney Rule
Yeah,
out
I'm
here.
not talking about the rule itself. I'm just saying that the discussion after a minority candidate has been interviewed. Okay, the Rooney Rule is now, and we've checked those boxes. Now we're allowed to make a hire. I think it's demeaning to the candidates. That's my opinion as an old white guy. Apologies. Tell me if I listen. Listen, I'm ignorant. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong, I'll listen to you. Absolutely.
Well, you're 100%. I think you're 100% right, though, that it is demeaning to the candidates because you're only hired because you have to fulfill this, again,
Not
as you
hired, but
mentioned,
interviewed.
interviewed. Yeah, you're only interviewed because you have to fill a quota. Well, these are quality candidates, the Rooney Rule or not. So you don't have to put it out there that, oh, you only did that. I think Albert Breer also had a tweet that he walked back pretty quickly because it just came off really insensitive and demeaning. Just, oh, well, now they did that. They can actually go get the guy they want. Well, no, there's plenty of great minority candidates. Most of the guys I like in this cycle, I mean, my last few cycles have been minority candidates. So I think that's definitely an issue with the whole thing. I don't know what the rule change should be. I like what the teams are doing now as far as compensating teams when you have a minority candidate hired away, because I think that really does reward teams for pushing to develop and put these guys in positions where they can actually get their spots. They're not stuck as a positional coach or anything. You're elevating them in the front office and the front and the coaching staff to hopefully get that get a chance later so you can get those comp picks. But will be interesting. And yeah, and Roderick Cook says road to hell neck paved with good intentions, no doubt, Roderick.
Ghost Pepper says the Chargers are offering Jim Harbaugh $90 million. Blank's pockets are deeper. If Harbaugh makes a decision, it won't be based on cash. And this is the same conversation I had with the Broncos fans last year because they've got the richest owners in American sports. And the Greg Penner group with Walmart was you don't want them making a decision because of money. It's nice that you can make money no object, but if a guy comes to your team because of money, then he's not making the decisions for the right reasons. And thank you for the reminder because I looked it up. The Chargers are in cap hell right now. They're $45 million underwater. So they're second worst only to the New Orleans Saints, who are $85 million over the cap right now. So there's about an $80 million swing, talking about money. There's about an $80 million swing of available cap space for the Falcons versus the LA Chargers right now. Wanted to see Keith McCann's coming here. Good to see you, Keith. He says, how about Belichick as coach, Joe Brady or Eric Bieniemy as offensive coordinator, future coach in waiting? That might be a way that you could entice Joe Brady to leave. Unless there's a coaching change, then Joe Brady's is absolutely available. I don't know that Joe Brady is quite ready for a head coaching job. I'm just thinking of possible, if there's a change, would you competition for Joe Brady, not talking about him coming in as being the coach. Will he be an offensive coordinator again next year? Probably. And Eric Bieniemy it's gone radio silence. I think it's about time we can shut the door on an Eric Bieniemy talk. There's 8 openings, and I don't know that he's been granted another interview at this point. There's minority candidates being hired, and he's not getting interviews. It has nothing to do with any of that. It has everything to do with Eric Bieniemy.
The other thing here, just as we wrap it up, Scott, because I know we got to get on the Broncos side of things, but I think you saw, I think, was it Mike Florio? Somebody in the NFL market has been talking about the Chiefs position maybe becoming open as well with Andy Reid. And you want to talk about, we just talked about the Bills potentially being an unbelievable spot. I mean, if you can get out to Kansas City where you don't have to really worry about the offense as much and build around Mahomes for the next 10 years, that would be one of the best openings we've seen in a decade. So we keep talking about all these spots. Why has nobody been hired? Not a single team has hired a head coach yet, right? I mean, we had the Bears just bring in Shane Waldron today, offensive coordinator hire. Great hire by them. But here we go. Robbie Red, how do you feel about the Shane Waldron hire for Chicago? I really like it. Shanahan tree, somebody that's probably going to need a quarterback that can operate somewhat in time. So we'll see what happens out there. But he did a good job with Russell Wilson. He did a great job with Geno Smith as well out there in Seattle. So I think Waldron's a great hire for them. And it makes me think that further closes the door on a Justin Fields return out there in Chicago. But we'll see. But I think it's a great hire for them. And Zach's right. The Raiders did hire Antonio Pierce. There's one. I forgot about that one. So there's one position closed. But other than that, nothing else has happened. But yeah, I like the Waldron hire for the.
And Jared Mayo was hired too in New England.
You're right. Gosh, man.
Yeah. So they didn't have to go through any interview process because it was actually in his contract language. So that was already done and approved.
Yeah.
If something were to happen.
No external candidates have been hired.
Yeah. Now, real quick, because there's a couple comments on here about the Rooney Rule, and then we're going to get out of here. I want to be clear on what I was saying because I don't mind getting crap for things I say. I don't like getting crap for things I didn't. I'm not complaining about the Rooney Rule itself. In fact, I think it's actually, as I've watched this process go along, I think it's actually a pretty good idea. This billionaire boys club is so incestuous that all they end up doing is keep retreading the same made men. I've said being a college coach is about like being in the mafia. Once you're a made man, you're a made man. And I've seen these same guys get fired and hired over and over and over again, especially in college. Like, oh, this guy was offensive coordinator at these 5 different schools. He got fired from every single one of them. The Rooney Rule helps these billionaire boys club owners who are on their own little bubbles expand their horizons just a little bit, even if it forces them to meet some new people and expand their horizons just a little bit. I think that's a good thing. The problem I have is the media then going out and reminding everybody that this rule has been satisfied. Just let it kind of take care of itself. We're smart enough to say that, okay, the Falcons have made these hires. Okay, well, we know the Rooney Rule. Let's not bring it up. That's why it makes it imply that these guys aren't qualified, and it pisses me off. I don't like that part of it. I don't like the media saying, after an interview of Ejiro Evero, the Rooney Rule has been satisfied. The Falcons are now clear to hire Bill Belichick. That can be implied. I mean, we can kind of connect the dots, but to put it out there in front of everybody like that, I think it's demeaning to the candidates themselves who are viable candidates. That's my thought on it.
Let the best candidate be hired. Hopefully it's, and keep pushing that we can get more minorities in the sport. It should match more what the player population is in reality. That's just,
I'm not getting into all of that. I'm just saying I don't need to have it waved in my face. I'm not getting into that part of things. Just let's not wave the flag every time it's the Rooney Rule has been satisfied. Just go satisfy the Rooney Rule and let's move on. Meet some new people. You might find out that you've done a better job of getting D'Amico Ryans instead of, my God, who's the guy that was at the with the Broncos when you and I started together, defensive coordinator. It was under Fangio, and then their offensive coordinator.
Ed Donatel.
Donatel, and who was their offensive coordinator?
They had Rick Scangarello at one point, and then they went to.
Either way, they keep recycling those guys. I think he ended up going up to Minnesota, but that may have been Donatel too. Anyway, On that note, we're going to get out of here, guys. We'll be back on Wednesday. We'll see what kind of news happens between now and then. We're going to hop over to Denver Broncos, youtube.com/milehighhuddle. We're going to go talk some draft, probably, if you want to join us. If anything happens, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because if anything happens between now and the next time we're on, we're going to go live with a gut reaction right away. So make sure you're on to get those alerts. I want to thank everybody for being here. Leave a comment after the fact. If I need to clarify something, I will. If you have questions or different opinions, I love them. Let's just, all be respectful. That's all I ever ask. I've never banned somebody for having a different opinion. I've banned them for being an a-hole. Mm-hmm. On that note, Nick, we're going to get out of here. Appreciate everybody being here. Have a great Monday, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.